What I'm going to do is interrupt this words aloud moment with silence. We're going to do the unsayable for a couple of minutes here. And Terry has some unsayabilities to hand out to everybody. What you'll be holding in your hand is a character from an ancient alphabet. It's purported to be an ancient alphabet. Discovered in the mid last century, a very dedicated and obsessive scholar spent his lifetime tracking these things down. He spent his time in archives and in libraries, leafing through grimoires and ancient tomes and whatnot. And he went into tombs and he went into archaeological spaces and discovered carvings and put together what he thought was an ancient alphabet from probably before Sumer, probably about 8,000 BCE. So that's what you will have in your hand. It's unsayable. No one knows how to pronounce these characters. But what I can do is read, I hope, a little paragraph or two from a document that this character, this scholar, published with the kind of, the background for the discovery of this alphabet. I believe some words are necessary about the discovery and possible meanings of this strange thing called the alphamericon. To bring it before the reader without explanation would be to coerce the alien tongue to speak a new language without knowing the first thing about it, and thus would be unfair to both reader and language. I can, however, provide no Rosetta Stone, but only the history of my own engagements and those of the others. My interest in things of this sort began early, but it wasn't until, I was 30, such a long time ago now, that the first element came into my possession. I'd of course passed it off as inscrutable. Fascinating, but inscrutable. Perhaps a practical joke some acquaintance might give him or herself away about in the near future, but that did not happen. I forgot about it. Months later in my study, I'd been dreaming, perhaps of my wife, Grace. A whole day whirled past in a winking, as time in a daydream does. I rubbed my eyes, my glasses beside me on the desk. As the sun set, the square of light rising upward along the white wall was almost gold. There was so much red in it, and was stratified because of the poorly made glass in the window. And I suddenly found myself thinking of this thing, this cryptogram, and wondered who or what it might signify, from whom or where it might have come. I drew it from the desk drawer I'd shoved it in. Again, the black configuration seemed to draw me, seemed to ask a silent question. Possibly I had even made the thing myself in one of those periods, those blank times through which I frequently pass, and of which I remember nothing. There are whole days that disappear, like peering into dark water. Nothing seems to escape this sign, not even, therefore, the sign. I did actually bring some poetry to read, and so I will do that now. I'd like to read a little bit from Orr. This book is structured around actually what Ian had talked about, his 80 millisecond moment. There are some very fascinating experiments in the 1980s. A fellow by the name of Benjamin Libet performed, and he discovered what's called the missing half second. So, as Ian mentioned, we're always behind ourselves. Time is recursive when we think and when we perceive. So you imagine a thought, but the EEG will tell you that there is brain activity already a half a second before your conscious thought. Worse still, when you're perceiving something, it takes a half second for it to be felt consciously. If you interpose another stimulus, a quarter second after the first one, that stimulus actually can alter the first one. So it loops back in time and changes what the perception would have been. And of course, we're not conscious of any of this. And so, as Ian says, we are already living in the déjà vu. There is no such thing as actual experience. We've already done it. It's already happened. And what's going on, no one is really quite sure, because a half second is a very long time, neurologically speaking. Anything can be going on there. But what they surmise is that the body is part of the whole thinking process, and it's rising up through the body. We're looking at virtuality of thought and perception in the body. And of course, quantum physicists and string theorists have told us this kind of thing goes on with particles already, right? Time reverses in the cloud chamber. Or thinking's a cloud chamber. Cumulonimbus incus. Anyone knows what's forgotten isn't. It's composed of suspended ice particles in an upflare on distance, faster by far than what a diary would have tracked. Is the diary the object to be written in, or the writing that takes place on the upturned faces of that object, still, minatory, febrile? An abrupt change in the temperature lapse rate does not mean she's still not alive, speaking in a language that seems familiar, as if from a long time ago, or another life. It's a measurement of stack overflow, over 18 kilometers high, and anyone knows those drugs are not good for you. The potential instability in the country, making leaving the hotel nerve-wracking. Darkened, obliterated. The horizon in the west, while the sky overhead, a dug out of the earth, mind blue. Questions are lightning, distantly probing, the wind shearing the tops off answers. Anyone in a diary is in the lapse, in a language from another instability. Systems communion takes place in possible creatures, made of the stickiness of brain-implanted underbrush. Arcane, ancient, particle overture flitting through the ground. Arcane systems, arcane as the communion of insects, mesmerized by ancient drought. The memories of old people, until it takes place, there is only pre-place, and in it there is no beginning. The library of possible lives, where we spent so much time, were creatures nearly made of writing, a writing in which an unwritten communication might take place, or a word might be a symptom, or the newfound stickiness of matter, particle language, as if I could ask anything at all, but my hands are looking for water, open talk systems, overture, aquifer, plebiscites of rain, animal-headed, brain-implanted hunter, flinting through underbrush, feeling a now that falls asleep in midair and drops to the ground. You'll notice in these poems that, well, you might not notice, they're constructed with a kind of pre-event, then there's an event, and then there are sort of trace streamers, particles that run off afterwards, and the same words are in all of them, so you'll hear bits of repeating language. Also, you'll probably pick up little bits of genre fiction, because there's bits of spy thriller running through this for some reason. Someone's therefore slipped behind the lapses to write the nano-future. Mind phosphor switched your seam clean through the oil-soaked, fine-grained, pharaoh-minded making of time. Mind children. Forensic phosphor in someone's cocktail, horn powder of the last rhino, one small contagious memory once, twice, what the others could have said but didn't. The forgotten sleep in memory and yet therefore to happen. The rain-switched streets, the address that slipped your mind or left behind in the seam, did they suspect you from the beginning? To come clean, how would you imagine your route through the city of oblique lapses, of oil-soaked encryptions, its fine-grained somnambulatory rule, its loss, pharaoh-minded and harbingering, its ownership of time and the slave trade, its shooting spree, the pen making you want to write and write? What kind of time flows there in that tripwire, sharashka heartbeat you waken in? Lost aurora, found auction, the unstable complication of the nano-future you might be an abducted memory of? Powder, the forgotten memory spree you waken in. Sharashka is one of those gulag concentration camps in the old Soviet Union where they took their engineers and their scientists and said, okay, work. Invent stuff. That rendezvous code, encrypted light deep into the wild locks. Though it could never happen, the river thrives in the breast of the gate as dreaming, not decoded. I want you to know that the rendezvous, though it happened, could never happen. Intricately implicated code organelles transmuted the moon encrypted on the river. Anamnesis thrives in that light, plunged deep into the breast of the diary. When we harvest the known, the unknown grows wild, receivers itself and deciphers itself with new locks, locks long before the gate, pitch and throng by the gate everlasting. Please forget you were a carrier as the crowds go apoplectic in Alexanderplatz and the authorities stiffen their knees after their underground dreaming. I want you a carrier as crowds. The hotel's torqued, unseen surfaces asleep like a box, no longer. Someone might voice a time effect key. Chuang key. Someone had been standing at the foot of the hotel's garden, quarantined Cattleya lockets of moonlight, the river's gleam of glass, dark torqued silk. During the day, you might envy the kingfishers, their clairvoyance here as they gather proof of the unseen. Had there been a voice cordoned off, glimmer of non-metal surfaces gone to sleep, of water asleep in its mineral cupboard, of someone's future waiting for them on the path, coming toward her with something in her hand? The present is opened like a box in an inaccessible archive. You are a time effect, of which a voice print can be made. Such a print is a key, but when public keys are interleaved with private keys in the algorithm, a key no longer suffices. Standing clairvoyants had been waiting for them in an archive. The news seemed imagined already in another language. News, you come from a great distance, hapticked to the message velocity, its root in radar emanations. Citrus evening lying in standing water at the airport, smudged with endless news. When they instruct you to enter the room, you come from another place. The room where everything seems permissible, except what can't be imagined. You would have already walked past such a room in another language, the one you left behind on the demolished hotel rooftop. Velocity emanations. Thank you. So I'd like to thank some of my newfound friends who have arrived here to hassle me and say nasty things, which they haven't yet, which is great. I want to thank you all for showing up. I want to thank my wife, especially Charlene, who is the heart of these poems. And I want to thank Terry and Anne and all the organizers and volunteers. This is a great festival. I'd never even heard of it before I moved up here. And from my friends, I heard about it. And the next thing I know, Terry's calling me up. And I said, what did you do, pay her? So I'd like to share some new work with you. When Sue and I were doing the interview this afternoon, Daniel asked us, or me, when I'd said something about liminal states, he said, what do you mean by that? What's a liminal state? Well, that's where we're going. If we weren't there already with OR, we're going farther into border states. This is kind of like a space between spaces. It's between language and the withheld, between representation and the thing, between the thingness of words, there's solidity, and the transparency, which we usually think about as meaning. They can take place in hypnagogia. They can take place as you're waking. They take place when you're reading. Your mind drifts away and goes other places. You're not subject to the tyranny of the text. You don't just read the text. You're always in dialogue with it. That's a liminal state, I think. And writing is maybe the preeminent liminal state. Where it puts us is into the position of being strangers to ourselves, which I think opens us up to possibility. And I think that's really something that's absolutely important, especially in our time now. The Russian formalists called this strategy astranenie. Okay, I like it, astranenie. And they said that like habit is the enemy of art. Well, yeah, it's also the enemy of love and all kinds of other things. And mostly when we speak in habitual ways. The one about the non-givedness of things, how to master the rotary phone. The manuscript I'm working on is called DIY. So all the titles have like how to do this and how to do that. So in case you wanted to master the rotary phone, here we go. Everything seemed fine until a minute ago. A small fragment of one of your memories seems to have slivered itself into my skin. Oh, that's not you. Everyone seems to be speaking another language, politics, misrepresenting its own truth-laundering, flashbang pronouncements, squid ink, black snake root lighting up the shade a moment of perpetuity as different from eternity, assuming, of course, we could agree on definitions, the awkward grace of vultures dialing in their dihedrals, the sky with its many-colored ribbons where clouds effortlessly age. Let's agree at least there are moments of suspension, shrunk nearly to human comprehension. Lipogrammet centrifuges, contact cement, Hudson 81484, the Cisco Kid, the interpretation of breathing red side dace where each thing can open the world. Well, if not, shouldn't there be? Matryoshka, how to report a problem with this poem. On the rotary phone. The foresight strategy of bone sovereignties, of dust and plastic iron filings, of tin pop can museums, of riverine sandbars on the concessions, Matryoshka dolls of your address as a child in this house, in this street, in this town, in this country, in this universe, a node, in this N+1 series that people used to call time. Comparing the distances a signal travels, the signal of your name rippling out in the light cone until it strikes something called a table or someone's mouth, the heartwood in a table or someone's tongue, or thorazine entropies of law, or pneumonia black holes of forgotten bending us around their invisibility without an opening, intricately open debris books, once known as dictionaries, scrying books called poetry by people once. Thank you. We heard what poetry is now. Thanks to Ian. I just have to be 50 years younger, that's all. The truth, I swear. How to grasp the truth of things as an out-of-body experience. And this is in memoriam for Pat Winger. The truth about arrows, the truth about personal armor, the truth about love, the truth about hotel mattresses emitting the dreams of strangers into the software of your sleep, the truth about furniture generally, the truth about time rising out of the body like a volley of arrows, the truth about the alphabet rising out of the body, a museum of stolen objects whose organization is suspect, the truth about water and its stony vocabulary, and about the GPS of language and the choral works of wires, the truth of the truth, about the story about the frying pan in which your mother struck your father after he'd arrived home, having been out all night, and your mother struck him over the head with the truth about stories, the truth about snow, which in the sun is silverware, showing off, or a dream of death, the truth about the book of junk being about collecting, the truth about string and string theory, strung together like its universes right to the brink of this confession about dying because we've only just witnessed it. That's a great story, and I don't know whether it's apocryphal or not, because Pat would never budge on how hard she struck. But it's a great story. The Zombie Codex, how to make Jumbie ink. Wikipedia and the OED helpfully suggests Zumbi fetish. In the Kikongo tongue, zombie, in A History of Brazil of 1819 by Robert Southey, apparently, there is a slippery light on every page that needs a reader to devour. What is ink but the knowledge of magic pulled through the hair of a corpse, or maybe some other pharmacology only the author is aware of? I am aware of being a newcomer in dramatic involution, whose language might be this: I am calling you from that distant place. There is nothing mechanical about the dead, believe me. They have always been thinking through the pyre and the sky tree thicket and the box with its many pages, its many wings, and the shimmer of a word and the life slipping up through it is a zombie memory you refuse. Pi, how to square the circle. Suppose a circle, suppose a point, the point at which caring overcomes you, the point at which flames catch fire. Suppose a Feynman diagram of your relationship to God. Suppose rose-breasted grosbeaks, the rich songs of both sexes, the point at which the mind or some part of its action becomes a circle. You have to ask yourself if the circles get progressively smaller or larger. Now that you have this prison, suppose a circle, suppose a temenus, whose center is, notwithstanding trichobothria, pulling ancient motion into present hearing, as one of your pasts begins to encroach. Why is sacred space empty, but for a few things? Model airplanes, Juneberry, the Guelph Formation, wavelengths of ultraviolet missed phone calls that left no messages, a muse or I. Thank you. Okay, one more from this little collection called Fizzed. How to pull the plug. Raven bounces a call off the blue operculum of the sky, humbled by this and by austerizers, small eddies, crushed glacial ice, spider woman, wind hounds, brush fire, stroke enzymes. If we keep going, we sense we are almost somewhere, which keeps us going. Just when writing sidles up to the reel and pulls its plug, forcing it to run on its backup generator. And the words fizzed by vagrant voltage feel as if they are no longer in their own language, whichever one that might have been. But from behind the door that never opened, they have the charm and the secrecy of facts, light lifting dust to a glowing haze. How are we doing, Terry? Good. So finally, we did immigrate to the Queen's Bush. And it's great, we love it. But it really, the reason we moved here is because it's such a wild and wonderful place. The geology, the everything. But the physical stuff, right? It was the physical stuff that pulled us here. So I had to end up writing some poems in response or in provocation or something. I don't know, this is just a group of them. It's not part of anything yet. So this one's called The Visitors. One of the interesting first things that happened, our son Sean does all kinds of wild and wonderful things, and so he found this midden of stone, and of course everybody has hundreds of middens of stones on their properties. And, oh, I wonder what's under this. And so Sean started burrowing down, and lo and behold, he found a real midden of stuff from 1850. He found a intact, and you guys know this already, but an intact bottle of Davis vegetable painkiller, which was the premier painkiller in the 19th century. Very common over-the-counter thing, and of course the vegetable refers to opium. The bottle was empty. So the visitors. Anyway, something much more significant is how things fall towards you when you least expect it. Gravity, for instance. A cause of many errors and celebrations, such as the white bench landed in the Scotch pines, listening with their needles to the conversations of absent visitors, or a lilac alone in a meadow that on closer inspection has the company of many almost once ordered stones, among which a silver brooch with wings, a perfectly intact teal bottle of Davis vegetable painkiller, an iron leg trap whose language is rust rather than blood, a dried up well with a boulder thrust in its throat. You have to ask, who are the visitors here? when the last time you woke remembering a dream was. What's with the speech of thunder substitutions? And if so, what could it be significant for the plot or the burnt-out subjunctives of displacement? Landscape with small words. So this has a little bit to do with the etymology of the word landscape. Landscape is small words. You can be anywhere but present in shap, from the Dutch, or shelf, or wave, or swell of till glaciation, oblivion, and for 10,000 years, Gajigokwe falls through the sky, and 10,000 things spring up, and the Queen's Bush, settlers' axes, then plows and muskets, barns, railways, silos, highways, power corridors, aggregate extraction, industrial wind turbines, nicotinoid, drone surveillance. Beyond this drumlin, a bullet suspended in the air for 10,000 years will disintegrate, another outwash with trees, and beyond that hillock, a coy wolf den at the rim of the aspen glade through which a harrier, ghosting, finesses the smallest of sun and shadow steeped, glide, beat, beat, glide, fugue words. Okay. 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Okay. I'm stalling. I'm just stalling. Lifeline. I've been walking through fields of fireweed for quite some time, ghost seeds drifting along the edge of transparency, etching now right to the forest of larch and maple. Things seem closer once you can say their names, yet some of the most important things we've believed in together remain unsaid. Shadows are transparent, and the red-shafted flicker I've never seen in the politics of fear. Fear, our failure, can be burnt off with nitrogen, someone once said. When the sun sets, things don't vanish so much as forget themselves. What is a walk through this meadow but a walk through this meadow? Yellow-shafted flicker, fireweed ghosts, goldenrod, Indian grass, milkweed ghosts, wind about 12 degrees Celsius, where some deer rested. The dead tried to farm this meadow and found a library of stones. Homemade archaeology. The radio in the flecked by turbine shadow flicker is squeezed through a DNA torque gene driver. Ravens fly off in all directions, weaponed with gesture light, burning off the scalded mercy of a stream. It seems sometimes you need to come a great distance to get to the present. That body that appears as a pike is someone else's language. Palatial thunder in the south, under a bullet-riddled fuselage of night sky. Whatever happened is still happening. Refractory in a catacresis for progress. Proton Station, and before that, the northern terminus settlement founded by Colonel Price. And so, an in Nejakanadikiyu. Within that particular trajectory, you are inside of a heading of thinking falling the way a coin or a knife falls through still water, turning waves of light lazily over, out. Excommunicados. This is for Charlene. Having given up their voices, stars let them fall to earth as the clatter and yawp of wood frogs, spring peepers, ringing out their brightness in the otherwise stillness and what might appear to us as darkness. That was the night of the day in April you were nearly killed after all the undeveloped, unlikely, undistributed elements arriving at that still journey arrived. You standing miraculously there alone in the empty field, blue and empty sky road strewn with debris, shiny and broken things. As if there were parallel worlds or the thread of substitutions across impermeable borders, a camera shredding its images under a field, rogue stars, weather irises. And this is a piece for my son, Sean. It's called Light. One investigation revealed the light's origin as bone, but another proved aspirin. A third found evidence for the tongues of meadowlarks, and another the waterfall. Someone even thought the word of a god just before shadows began to dig their own graves. But after the fire tore you, standing in that light's wounding, the body is the true ghost. A film drenched in the cruel exposure of pain, we thought we knew at last, as if there might be water everywhere or shadow, as if each thing could be emptied of its own brightness. And last piece was an experience of welcome, I guess, in the first fall we were here, right around this time. It's called syzygy, which in Jungian terms is the union of opposites. Yellow median line of sight, road cut through phosphor. Oh boy, let me try that one again. Yellow median line of sight, road cut through fossiliferous time, dark trees unmentioned by the pre-dawn dark, attention to nothing, things with which we are familiar but of which we are ignorant, wide yellow eye apparitioning, clatter roof, clatter hoof, clatter bone, clatter along metal skin flashing out through the body's porous organdy, the dream of life, its meadow, its break, its bird flight, its stream aloof with half darkness, smoke, snow, ghosts slithering over the pavement to where I have come to a stop, listening to the loneliness of a single moment, steeped among remnants, relics, residuals of things, the diaries of blood. Just then, here out of the reach of any gods, between the living and the dead, myself and these things, I couldn't discern a difference. Thank you. Thank you.